As Darwin and Wallace noticed, islands provide very good places to observe evolutionary patterns. Some group of organisms happens to make it to an island that maybe it formed by a volcano, was just bare rock, nothing living there before. And so here's a new place. Things can start growing there, settling in. As we start to build soil, get plants growing there, animals can come in, and we start to get new types of life in these places. So Darwin saw, for example, in the Galapagos Islands, there are 14 different species of finches there, having quite a variety in form. You see big beaks, small beaks, in between beaks, lots of different forms. Different islands in the group, different habitats, and they've specialized in quite a wide variety of ways, whether you have big beak for cracking seeds, more pointy beak for feeding on cactus fruit here, an insect catching beak. Here's one that's good for poking into cracks. They can actually use a spine to try to hunt for insects hiding in crevices and bark and things like that. So Darwin, of course, not knowing about biochemistry at all, combined that with genetics, and so in the 30s and 40s, you have the combination of information from genetics, based ultimately on the work of Mendel, with evolution by natural selection, and this combination is known as the modern synthesis. Variations that Darwin saw, we now know go back largely to mutations in the DNA. And so this draws together paleontology, developmental biology, things like that. There are people today calling for a new synthesis, bringing in additional factors that we know about today, whether this requires a completely new synthesis or further updating of the old modern synthesis. Different people have different views just how big a change this is. But something that's being discussed, you might hear about that. Evolution is sometimes described as happening by chance. Not the best description. There's a good deal that's very much not random. Natural selection plays a big role. What combination of genes you have has to actually work. You have to survive. That limits the number of possibilities. But there are some things that are mathematically not so predictable. Again, random from our point of view. That doesn't mean that God couldn't have a plan. It just means not something we can figure out. We can see examples where evolution, if we have the same situation in more than one place, we get basically the same result. Fruit flies, patterns of wing size, same types of fruit flies, spread to two different places and have the same changes. Or stickleback, a type of small fish, into a new lake, and over time they've specialized in similar ways to bigger and smaller forms. Will a particular mutation happen? Yeah, our best description of that is a model of probability, like rolling a die, something like that. Will a particular catastrophe happen? Say, might an asteroid crash in? Well, over time, eventually it does happen, and not something particularly predictable. I mean, these days we can look for them and hopefully do something about it ahead of time, but that's not something that a dinosaur or a trilobite or something like that could have done. Individual success. Now, of course, having genes that give an advantage, that helps, but again, sometimes some weird random thing could happen and something runs into trouble, even though there wasn't anything particularly genetically problematic. It's not entirely something that's a fully predictable from a human point of view phenomenon. Another thing to keep in mind is the Earth itself is changing. Plate tectonics. Plates move around. We can measure this happening today with GPS. And so at different points, different areas of land, different bodies of water will be connected or separated. We build mountains, they wear down. These changes change the environment, change what types of things are found where, different opportunities for different living things. So here are diagrams showing basically from the beginning of dinosaur to now, the moving of the continents, splitting from being all connected as Pangea to our modern relatively spread out condition. So for example here, both South America and Africa are islands, isolated from each other. Things like that. Different connections, different separation. This is very useful in understanding distribution of fossils, and even modern ones. Different things split apart and can diversify or die out in different places. And then we have connecting again. So for example, South America, island for quite some time. Now it's joined up to North America. Some South American things came north, possums, armadillos. Some North American things went south, llamas, jaguars. So you have mixing of what were separate. Also, where we have land, where we have ocean, big influence on what climate is like in different places, and even global patterns of being warmer or colder. All these are changes in the environment affect how things evolve. Here are some examples, classic cases of fossils that are found across what are now widely separated continents. But back when they were all connected, they would have been living in a particular part of the world. Changes in gene frequency over time. We can look in detail what are the different genotypes in the population. And of course, thinking in phenotype, say we have a simple dominant recessive pattern. Then if you've got at least one of the dominant gene, that's what it will look like. And so we can work through these numbers. Say we have a population, we found 910 that were dominant, 90 that were recessive. Okay, that gives us the pattern there. Okay, now recessive, that's going to be the number that are, in this case, little a's. The 91% that we can look at and see, that's going to combine these two. And so then we can go through calculations, figure out the frequency of different alleles in the population. Total number of alleles can, say we're looking at diploids, so 2 copies. Then there will be twice as many alleles as there are individuals. And tally them up, get the frequencies. We have a number of factors that drive small-scale evolution. Instead of equilibrium, things being in a balance and staying the same, we're looking for change. Non-random mating. If individuals tend to prefer mating with a particular type, well, then others are going to lose out, or perhaps some individuals favor this, some individuals favor that, and we have a tendency to diverge, split into different patterns there. Genetic drift is the random changes in gene frequency, just because over time, well, one individual has this many offspring, one has that many offspring. There's some random variation there. And so over time, we have a little more of one, a little more of the other, those types of things happening. course, mutations, gene flood, we get some other population mixing in, bringing new stuff, and natural selection, favoring or disfavoring particular features. So here's an example. Let's imagine we were starting with a bunch of beetles, and they range in color from more pale to more dark. And so if there's no particular selection, okay, we've got genes and some of them end up darker, some lighter, we get this mix. Stabilizing selection would happen if the extremes are at a disadvantage and the ones in the middle do better. So our darkest, our lightest ones die out, and we have dominantly the middle. Directional selection will happen if one extreme does worse and one does better. Let's say, for example, these beetles are living someplace where there's a lot of dark surfaces, and predators have a hard time seeing the dark ones than the light ones. More the light ones get eaten, more the dark ones are successful, we're going to tend to see a shift in the color. We can also have disruptive selection. This is where two different patterns have an advantage, the ones in between are a disadvantage. And so this will tend to go from one group into two different forms. We're likely to split into multiple species. Sometimes there are special selective factors that promote a particular feature. For example, this is a map showing the historical distribution, fortunately it's not as wide now, of a major type of malaria affecting humans. Malaria, severe protist disease, spread by mosquitoes. But if you have one copy of the sickle cell anemia gene, you are resistant to malaria. And not surprisingly, people having that gene are tending to be ones in areas where malaria is significantly present. Now, if you get two copies of the sickle cell gene, then you have severe health problems and tend to die early. But if you have no copies and get malaria and die, well, that's not good for you either. So, having some frequency of the sickle cell gene associated with malaria fits in with the selection. Almost finished. Okay. Another complication, we can have frequency-dependent selection. Something that gets very common sometimes becomes a problem. And so variety may be favored rather than just one thing. So a classic example of this comes in fish in some of the big African lakes. There's certain types of fish that have specialized in swimming up to other fish and chomp, biting off some scales. Obviously that fish that just got bit is not happy about this. And so we have this fish actually has a mouth pointed kind of sideways to be able to swim up and bite the other fish. And so if the prey fish notices these guys tend to come up to me on my left, I'm watching out to that side. Then the less common ones coming from the right will have an advantage because the prey is looking out more to the left. But that means that we'll tend to see a decline in our ones coming from the left, more on the right. Now this guy is getting bit more on the right, he's going to start watching more to the right. Now the ones coming up from the right are at a disadvantage, and the fewer ones from the left have the advantage. So it tends to go up and down, more left, more right, back and forth. Another classic example, these snails, they're native to Europe, though invasive here and there in the US and elsewhere. So here's a picture. Say if you're a hungry bird looking for a nice tasty escargot lunch. Okay, I'm looking for a snail. Let's see. Maybe I should look for something that's kind of round and orangey yellow. That's a lot of these. Okay, so the bird looks for those. It's not paying attention to stripy or white things then. So the orange yellow ones are going to decline. White and stripy is going to become more common. But eventually that bird is going to figure out, I'm not finding as many of these orange and yellow things, but I'm starting to notice there's some stripy snails around here. I'm going to start looking for stripy things. Now, the stripy ones are going to get eaten more. Bird's not looking for the yellow-orange so much anymore. So those will tend to get more common as the striped ones decline. And so, having variety, some of the snails are less targeted, but when they get too common, then they become more target. And so you have this dynamic change over time. You also have variation due to environment. These are yarrow, a common kind of weedy plant. And as the diagram shows, you get different sizes growing in different places, different elevation. This happens to be kind of California over into Nevada type of area. Now, okay, we got taller, medium, short, depending on different places. So we've got this variation. Let's suppose something happens and somehow those die out. Now we've just got big and little and not the things in between. That might lead to developing different species, a tall and short yarrow. So we have these possible variations over time leading to further evolution.